Yo, what is good, YouTube? Welcome back to the channel. We're about to react the most painful mafia boss deaths ever. You know what I mean? Last time we reacted to like the cartels, how they died or whatever. Like the leaders. Like I said, man, living a life of crime like this, the goal is, in my opinion, live the most luxury lifestyle as long as you can, and just if you go out, you go out like Scarface. You know what I'm saying? So let's go take a look into this. Let's do it. All right.
On the morning of October 25th, 1957,
Ooh.
Albert Anastasia walked into the barber shop of the Park Sheraton Hotel in Manhattan.
Ooh, man, I totally forgot. So the cartels, a lot of them was just involved in like government and the military. They do a lot of like, stuff as though like walking to the barber shop, boom, right in your head, and just walk out like nothing happened. Like I forgot. Like, yeah, like, you know what I mean? He done retired from being a mob boss. He mowing the grass. What's up? How you doing? Boom. They do it like real weird. I ain't gonna hold
He
you.
sat in the chair, but moments later, two masked men rushed inside. They pushed the barber aside and started shooting. Confused, Anastasia jumped forward and tried to attack what he thought were his killers, but he was only striking at their reflections in the mirror. The gunman kept firing until he collapsed dead on the floor. He was one of the suspected Joe the Boss's shooters, and the co-founder and leader of Murder, Inc., the Mafia's group of killers. His nickname was the Lord High Executioner, and he controlled much of New York's waterfront, and later became boss of what would be called the Gambino crime family. But he was seen as reckless and unstable. Rumors spread.
We might have to react to that. Probably not one of this guy's videos, man. And a link to the video will be in the description box, by the way. The Gambino family on how they did their thing, man. So let's do it.
That Anastasia was selling Mafia memberships for money, and his large gambling debts made him seem even more unpredictable. Also, his allies, such as Vito Genovese, which we'll talk about later on, wanted his power. His underboss, Carlo Gambino, quietly joined Genovese, agreeing to take over once Anastasia was removed. That October morning in 1957, the plan was carried out.
Damn.
Joe the Boss. On April 15th, 1931, Giuseppe Masseria, also known as Joe the Boss, sat at a table in the Nuova Villa Tamaro restaurant on Coney Island.
At a restaurant. Notice how they die versus the other, in the other video, what I did with the Mafia cartel. They die so different.
Playing cards. He was relaxed, not knowing that his own lieutenant, Lucky Luciano, had already made a secret deal with rival boss Salvatore Maranzano. During the card game, Luciano got up from the table, leaving Masseria alone, and moments later, gunmen rushed in and opened fire. Masseria was hit in the head, back, and chest, and collapsed over the table as the shooters fled. He was the boss of what would later be called the Genovese crime family, and one of the most powerful figures in New York, but wanting more power, he created many enemies. By 1930, his drive to control the city had started the Castellammarese War, a bloody fight against Salvatore Maranzano and his allies. At first, most sided with Masseria, but as the war dragged on, his side took heavy losses, and Luciano saw his chance once Maranzano promised him a top position and control of rackets if he turned on Masseria. Even Joe Adonis, once close to Masseria, joined the plot and secretly warned Luciano when Masseria grew suspicious. Among the shooters that day were, most likely, some incredibly important names, like Albert Anastasia, Vito Genovese himself, and Bugsy Siegel. Outside, Ciro Terranova sat in the getaway car, but he was so shaken after the murder that Siegel reportedly had to push him aside to get them moving. Masseria's death ended the Castellammarese War.
Oh man, they finna get you out of here too, boy. You better try that damn car, man. They'll get you out of there too.
Gave Maranzano
like I said, bro. One getting a haircut, one playing cards, bro. It'd be so different, man.
Capo
How you
dei
get back
Capi,
being a
the
boss
of bosses. But Luciano had bigger plans, and you'll see why now. Salvatore Maranzano. Just months after Joe the Boss's death and his victory in the Castellamarese War, Salvatore Maranzano was in his Manhattan office inside the New York Central Building, where he had called Lucky Luciano and Vito Genovese for a meeting. Secretly, Maranzano was planning to kill Luciano, but what he didn't know was that Luciano was already aware of the plan. Suddenly, 4 men disguised as tax agents entered the building, disarmed the guards, and rushed Maranzano. He was stabbed several times and then shot, dying in his office that afternoon. Why did he want to kill Luciano after he had switched to his side, betraying Joe the Boss, though? In the few months he ruled, Maranzano reorganized the Mafia, creating the 5 families of New York, each with its own boss, underboss, and soldiers. At the same time, though, the fact that he gave himself the title of boss of all bosses wasn't okay with Luciano and the younger guys, who thought Maranzano had old-fashioned ways, demanded money and respect from the others, and disliked Luciano's close ties with non-Italian gangsters like Meyer Lansky and Bugsy Siegel. He even compared himself to Julius Caesar and talked about shaping the Mafia like the Roman Empire. To men like Luciano, Genovese, and Costello, he seemed less like a leader and more like a dictator. By September, Maranzano suspected Luciano was turning against him, so he tried to act first. He hired the Irish gangster Mad Dog Call to kill Luciano, but Luciano knew about it and struck before him, sending in the disguised killers who ended Maranzano's life. With Maranzano gone, Luciano ended the idea of a single boss of bosses. We'll look later at the new system he created. Bugsy Siegel.
Wow.
On the night of June 20th, 1947, Benjamin Siegel, another one of the suspected shooters
of 47. Damn.
Joe the Boss was sitting on a sofa in Beverly Hills, reading the Los Angeles Times, when bullets started coming through the window from outside, hitting him in the face and chest. One shot destroyed his left eye instantly, and he died on the spot. At that point, he was one of the most famous mobsters in America, even seen as a celebrity. He was central to building Las Vegas, and he had taken charge of the Flamingo Las Vegas Casino Hotel project, which he financed with money from his mob partners. However, the project was a disaster. The casino opened before it was finished, lost huge amounts of money, and went over budget from an estimated cost of $1 million to $6 million. His mob partners believed he had stolen money or, at the very least, lost control of their investment. They lost patience, and behind the scenes, they decided Siegel had become too risky. Who gave the final order is still debated. Paul Castellano. On the evening of December 16, 1985, outside Sparks Steakhouse in Manhattan, Paul Castellano, the boss of the Gambino crime family, one of the most powerful mafia groups in America, stepped out of his car. Suddenly, gunmen rushed him and opened fire. He was hit several times before he could react, and his newly chosen underboss, Thomas Bilotti, who had been driving the car, was killed right beside him. Across the street, John Gotti, another well-known mafia guy, sat in a car, watching to make sure the killing was carried out. What led to all of this is an interesting story. Castellano ran the family more like a businessman than a street gangster, but many of his men thought he was greedy and too detached from everyday street life. Resentment grew inside the family when he refused to allow drug dealing, which had been a big source of revenue. Then, the FBI bugged Castellano's mansion, leading to federal charges, and in December 1985, his longtime underboss Agnello Della Croce died. Castellano didn't attend the wake, which angered the Manhattan faction. Soon after, he named Bilotti as the new underboss, a decision few respected. He also hinted that he might break up John Gotti's crew, which for Gotti meant that if he didn't act first, his own life and power were at risk. All of this led to Gotti's hit at Sparks Steakhouse, carried out in front of busy evening crowds. Only weeks later, John Gotti became the new boss of the Gambino family, Frankie Boy. This is one of the most recent ones we're going to talk about, as it happened on the night of March 13th, 2019. Gunshots were heard in a Staten Island street, and Francesco Calli, known as Frankie Boy, collapsed in front of his home after being hit 10 times with a 9mm handgun.
Where was it? Man, I'm telling you, it just seemed like, bro, if you in that type of power, like, man, there's no loyalty amongst thieves, man. That's a real saying, bro. Like, fam, if I don't understand, if you in power by a whole bunch of criminals, fam, it only matter of time before they get your ass up out of there, bro. It ain't but a matter of time, bro. Y'all, they be climbing so high to power, and it's like, bro, they just gonna get you up out of there too, because every last one of them are not gonna like everything you do. Somebody's gonna dislike something you're doing or the way you're running something, bro.
Boy collapsed in front of his home after being hit 10 times with a 9mm handgun. Security cameras later showed what happened. A pickup truck crashed into his parked Cadillac, making him come outside. Calli walked over to the driver, but things quickly went south. He tried to hide behind his car, but the shooter gave him no chance and opened fire. He had long been seen as one of the most important links between the American Mafia and organized crime in Sicily, being the boss of the Gambino family. The murder shocked New York, as no Mafia boss had been killed in the city since Paul Castellano in 1985. At first, police thought it was a mob hit, maybe a dispute within the family, but the truth was crazier than that. 3 days later, police arrested a 24-year-old man named Anthony Camello in New Jersey. He was deeply involved in QAnon conspiracy theories, and he claimed he thought Cali was part of the deep state and believed President Trump had given him support to make a citizen's arrest. Camello had even
Nigga, what? Man, come on, bro. Now I got to look into this, man. Like what? Now I got to look into this, man. I'm gonna remember this dude, Frankie Boy, the assassination of Frankie Boy. I got to see that, man. I know there's some theories behind this, man.
Tried similar things before, like going after New York Mayor Bill de Blasio and Congresswoman Maxine Waters. When he appeared in court after the murder, he had QAnon symbols drawn on his hand. The case went on for years. Camello gave different stories, and his lawyers argued that he was mentally unfit. Finally, in January 2025, it was revealed that he had pleaded guilty to manslaughter and was sent to prison, but details of his sentence were kept secret because of threats against him and his family. Frank Costello. On the evening of May 2, 1957, Frank Costello stepped out of his car and walked into his Manhattan apartment building. As he crossed the lobby, though, a man approached and fired a shot. The bullet grazed his head and knocked him down, but he survived. The shooter was Vincent Gigante, acting on orders from Vito Genovese.
Oh, somebody finna get gone now. Y'all done messed up. He finna get y'all going now. You done messed up, man.
Costello lived, but the message that his time as boss was finished was clear. Within days, he stepped aside and Vito Genovese took control of the family.
What?
Costello was a close ally of Lucky Luciano, Meyer Lansky, and Bugsy Siegel, building his wealth during Prohibition. And he became famous for mixing crime with politics, which is why he was nicknamed the Prime Minister of the Underworld. He influenced Tammany Hall politicians, judges, and police. His decline started in the 50s, when he was investigated during the Kefauver hearings, where millions saw him nervously fidgeting on live television. He was convicted of tax evasion and contempt of Congress, spending years in and out of prison, so his grip on the Luciano family weakened, and Genovese saw his chance. After retiring, he still held some influence, with leaders like Carlo Gambino and Tommy Lucchese visiting him for advice. On February 18, 1973, at the age of 82, he suffered a heart attack at home and—
Oh, man, he good. He good. He lived his life. I don't know why we talking about him. Shoot, 82? You could left him out. You could left him off here. 82? Shoot.
died in a Manhattan hospital. Carlo Gambino. Gambino was one of the most important mob bosses of all time. Since after Albert Anastasia was murdered in 1957, he took control of the family that would forever carry his name. By the 1960s, he dominated the commission, guiding not just his own men, but much of the American Mafia itself. Under his rule, the Gambino family became the largest of New York's 5 families, controlling ports, trucking, unions, and rackets at JFK Airport. Unlike flashier bosses, Gambino avoided attention and rarely saw prison. His only sentence was 22 months for tax evasion back in the 1930s. On October 15, 1976, the 74-year-old mob boss had spent the evening watching the New York Yankees win the American League pennant on TV, but hours later, the heart disease that had troubled him for years took his life. Instead of handing power to his underboss Agnello Della Croce, he chose his brother-in-law Paul Castellano as successor. That decision split the family and set the stage for Castellano's assassination, which we previously explained in 1985. John Gotti. After eliminating Castellano in 1985, he became the boss of the Gambino family and showed his peculiar personality. Unlike earlier bosses, he loved attention. He wore expensive suits, smiled for the cameras, and earned the nickname the Dapper Don. However, having a high profile comes with its risks, and the FBI started gathering evidence on him. In 1991, his underboss, Salvatore Sammy the Bull Gravano, turned on him, and his testimony combined with secret recordings sealed Gotti's fate.
Snitched on you, my boy. Yeah, that's a part of the game too. People don't understand. When you live a life of crime, they be like, man, when he snitched on me, snitching a part of this. Yeah. I'm telling you, y'all be wanting to do this all that gangster shit. Somebody gonna snitch on you. I think that should be accept it in the lifestyle because like that's going to happen. It's going to happen, fam. You know what I mean? Somebody gonna snitch on you, fam. It's a part of the game. I can't stand when people be like, man, I don't like snitches. I get that. But at the same time, understanding the whole aspect of the lifestyle, you should know for a fact that somebody is going to tell on your monka ass. Yes, sir.
In 1992, he was convicted of 5 murders, racketeering, loan sharking, tax evasion, and more. He was sentenced to life in prison with no chance of parole, and from then on, he spent nearly all of his time in isolation. By the late 1990s, his power was gone. His son and brother tried to run the family in his name, but prosecutions and informants crippled the Gambinos. At the same time, Gotti's health broke down. Cancer spread, and by 2002, he was too weak to fight it. At the age of 61 on June 10, 2002, he died from throat cancer. His funeral was pretty symbolic. About 300 people followed the procession, but no representatives from the other New York families came. The Gambino family he once ruled was divided and weakened, and many saw his death as the start of the Mafia's decline in America. Vito Genovese. In the late 1950s, Vito Genovese was at the top of the Mafia world. He had forced Frank Costello into retirement, ordered the killing of Albert Anastasia, and taken control of the most powerful family in New York. In 1957, however, when he organized the Appalachian Mafia Summit to confirm his authority, police raided the meeting, exposing the Mafia's existence to the public. Only 2 years later, in 1959, he was sentenced to 15 years in prison on narcotics charges.
That's it?
From inside Atlanta Federal Penitentiary, he tried to run the family, but his grip on power slipped away. He already had problems with the law back in 1937, when he faced murder charges and fled back to Italy. There, he openly supported Mussolini's fascist regime and built ties with government officials. It wasn't until after World War II that he would return to New York, cleared of charges after key witnesses turned up dead. Many believe that he was convicted through a setup by his rivals, such as Lucky Luciano or Meyer Lansky. On February 14, 1969, at the Federal Prison Hospital in Springfield, Genovese suffered a heart attack and died at 71 years old. Al Capone. Capone, often called Scarface, made his name during Prohibition as the head of the Chicago outfit. He controlled illegal alcohol, gambling, and prostitution. To the public, though, he was both a criminal and a kind of celebrity. Some people admired him for giving money to charities, while others saw the killings and corruption, especially after the St. Valentine's Day massacre in 1929.
St. Valentine's Day I gotta write this stuff. I might have to write this stuff down, bro. You know what I mean? I probably remember it, though. St. Valentine's Day Massacre, 1929.
Where they murdered 7 members and associates of Chicago's North Side gang. The government couldn't convict him for murders or bootlegging, but they finally charged him with tax evasion. In 1931, he was sentenced to 11 years in prison, and that's where his real punishment began. Capone had contracted syphilis years earlier, likely while visiting brothels, and he never treated it. By the time he was in prison, the disease had spread to his brain, causing neurosyphilis. He grew more confused and weak, spending his last year in Alcatraz's hospital ward before being released in 1939. He spent his final years in Florida, mentally broken. In 1946, doctors said his mind had declined to that of a 12-year-old child. On January 21st, 1947, at 48 years old, Al Capone collapsed after having a stroke, and at first it looked like he might have recovered, but then his condition got worse. He developed bronchopneumonia, and a few days later, on January 25th, weakened by all of these health issues.
I ain't gonna lie, that might be the most high getting your ass out of here for all that shit you done did, bro. Yeah, that's crazy.
Died from a heart attack. Lucky Luciano. Luciano was probably the man who transformed the Mafia the most. After the Castellamarese War, instead of proclaiming himself the new boss of the bosses, he created the Commission, a council that allowed bosses from the 5 families of New York to settle disputes and share power. This was done to avoid wars, and it gave him the nickname of the father of the modern American Mafia. Also, unlike older bosses who wanted to keep things only Sicilian, Luciano believed in making alliances with anyone if it brought profit. However, power brought attention, because in 1936, prosecutor Thomas Dewey convicted him of running a prostitution racket, and Luciano was sentenced to 30 to 50 years in prison. Even behind bars, however, he stayed influential. During World War II, he made a secret deal with the U.S. Navy to help protect New York docks from Axis sabotage, and in return, his sentence was reduced in 1946, but only once he accepted deportation to Italy. From then on, he lived in Naples under close watch. He could no longer openly run the Mafia in America, but he still held influence through his allies. In the 1940s, he briefly operated from Havana until U.S. pressure forced him back to Italy. Then, at Naples Airport on January 26,
Uh-oh.
1962, he collapsed and died of a heart attack after he had just finished meeting with American film producer Martin Gush, who wanted to make a movie about his life. What Luciano didn't know was that Italian drug agents were following him that day, ready to arrest him on smuggling charges, but he died before they could act. Later, his body was flown to New York, where more than 2,000 mourners came to his burial in Queens. Carlo Gambino himself delivered his eulogy. If you liked this video, subscribe for similar ones or join my Discord to suggest another.
Man, most painful mafia boss deaths ever. So a lot of them just died of natural causes. That's surprising to me, bro. But like I said, a lot of them died just, man, chilling somewhere. You know what I mean? One died playing cards. One died at the barbershop. Man, that's crazy. It's crazy to me. But y'all like, subscribe to me, what y'all think of the video. We're about to get up out of here. Yes, sir.